Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing our series on Ralph Waldo Emerson's journals. We are in Volume 3, and we are in May 19th of 1833, and Emerson is 29 years old and is currently in Italy. And with that said, we will go ahead and get started. May 19th. Hot weather steadily for 3 weeks past, and Florence is a degree of latitude farther north than Boston. 6 or 7 blazing hours every day, when, as the Florentines say, there's nobody but dogs and Englishmen in the streets. Then the pleasant evening walk from 6 to 7 or 8 o'clock upon the Cascina, or on the banks of the little Sylvan Mugnon, or in the Boboli Gardens. And wherever I go, I am surrounded by beautiful objects. The fine old towers of the city, the elegant curve of the Ponte Trinata, the rich purple line of the Apennines, broken by the bolder summit of the marble mountains of Carrara. And all is Italian. Not a house, not a shed, not a field that the eye can for a moment imagine to be American. Miss Anna Bridgen said very wittily that so inveterate were her Dutch instincts that she sees almost no work of art in Italy but she wants to give it a good scrubbing. The Duomo, the Campanella, and the statues. May 21st. Rose early this morning and went to the Bello Sguardo out of the Roman gate. It was a fine picture, this Tuscan morning, and all the towers of Florence rose richly out of the smoky light on the broad green plain. I passed the Michelozzi villa, where Guicciardini wrote his history. Returning, I saw the famous fresco painting on the wall within the city, directly opposite the Roman gate, the work of Giovanni de San Giovanni, executed, they say, to show the skill of Tuscan art. A story is told that some Roman painter, having been sent for to execute a public work in Florence, the Florentine artist painted this wall that he might see it on his entrance into the city. When he came and saw this painting, he inquired whose work it was, and being informed it was done by Florentines, he returned immediately to Rome, saying that they had no occasion for foreign artists. I like the sayers of no better than the sayers of yes. On bravely through the sunshine or the showers, time hath his work to do, and we have ours. Il tempo il suo mestiere, ed io el mio. I have finished the Promessi Sposi, and I rejoice that a man exists in Italy who can write such a book. I hear from day to day such hideous anecdotes of the depravity of manners that it is an unexpected delight to meet this elevated and eloquent moralist. Renzo and Lucia fra Cristoforo and Federigo Borromeo, all are excellent, and which is the highest praise, all excite the reader to virtue. May 25th. It is the festa of San Zenobio, once Bishop of Florence, and at the churches the priests bless the roses and other flowers which the people bring them, and they are then esteemed good for the cure of headache, and are laid by for that purpose. Last night in the Duomo I saw a priest carrying a silver bust of San Zenobio, which he put upon the head of each person in turn who came up to the barrier. This ceremony also protects him from the headache for a year. But, asked I of my landlady, do you believe that the bust or the roses do really cure the headache of any person? Secondo alla fede de ciascuno, she replied. It is my festo also, which means, in the footnote, his birthday. Is not Santa Croce a grand church? Nobody knows how grand who only sees it once. Its tombs, and then the mighty window of stained glass which a man sees at noon and thinks he knows what they are worth, and comes back after sunset and finds to his delight, I did, a wholly novel and far more beautiful effect. They should be seen just about the hour of candlelight. We came out to Europe to learn what man can, what is the uttermost which social man has yet done. And perhaps the most satisfactory and most valuable impressions are those which come to each individual casually and in moments when he is not on the hunt for wonders. To make any sincere good use, I mean what I say, of what he sees, he needs to put a double and treble guard upon the independency of his judgment. The veriest Luther might well suspect his opinion upon the Venus or the Apollo. I wrote to GAS yesterday what I have found true, that it is necessary for the traveler, in order to see what it is worth seeing, and especially who is worth seeing in each city, to go into society a little. Now no man can have society upon his own terms. If he seek it, he must serve it too. He immediately and inevitably contracts debts to which he must pay, at a great expense often of inclination and of time and of duty. Comanda niente, signor? Niente. Feliz nota, signor, feliz nota. Such is the dialogue which passes every evening betwixt Giga and me, when the worthy woman lights my lamp, and leaves me to Goethe and Sismondi, to pleasant study hours and to sound sleep. I have been to the Accademia delle Belle Arti, and there saw an unfinished work of Michelangelo's. His opinion was asked concerning a block of marble, whether it were large enough to make a statue of. Yes, he said, a colossus. And the inquirers, doubting, he went to work, and cutting a little here and a little there, rudely sketched a figure of gigantic dimensions, and left it so, a sort of sculptor's puzzle. Tuesday morn, May 28th. Sad I leave Florence, the pleasant city. I have not even seen it all, and between negligence and mishap have failed to see the library. The system of Mezziaria or Medier is universal in the agriculture of Tuscany. The introduction of the potato into general use, and the culture of Saracenic grain, has done much to alleviate the distress of the peasantry. Labor is dog cheap. The hat manufacturer is almost peculiar. Mr. Miles tells me that it takes one woman 1 week to make a hat, and he usually orders 1,000 hats in a week. The taxation seems very irregular and sometimes enormous. Every ox that enters the gates of Florence pays 11 Francesconi at the gate. May 28th. Left Florence, stopped at the Pratolino, 5 miles out of the city, to see the colossal statue of Father Apennine by John of Bologna. It is grand, if only from its size. They call it 60 feet high, meaning probably that in a standing posture it would be so high. I got up into his neck and head and looked out of his ear. Fine mountain scenery to the frontier of the Roman state. At last, on reaching a new height, we saw the Adriatic Sea. We slept at Lacca, the first village on the Roman territory, 36 miles from Florence. May 29th. At 4 a.m. we set forward, and passing through a picturesque country, arrived at Bologna, 25 miles, at 10:30 o'clock. Here we visited the celebrated statue of Neptune by John of Bologna, good enough, but why so famous? The gallery of the Academy and of the Palazzo Lambacari, both rich in Guidos, Carraccis, and Guerchinos. The museum and library, founded by Marsilius, 100,000 volumes. The cathedral, the church of San Domenico, where is Guido's fresco. Paradise, and where lie the bones of Guido, of the 2 Carraccis, and also of St. Dominic. Here, too, are 2 leaning towers, one deviating 9 feet from the perpendicular, and a good story is told of their building. All the streets are lined with porticos, so that the inhabitants walk always under cover, which, in the rain and under this dangerous sun, is a great public convenience. From the gate of the city, a portico 3 miles in length, formed of 650 arcades, leads to the church of the Madonna della Guardia. In the piazza were planted some pieces of artillery, which have stood there since the soi distant revolution 2 years ago. There are 75,000 souls. May 30th. From Bologna to Ferrara, 32 miles. Nearly all the way the road was paved and lined with trees. Arrived at Ferrara at 4 p.m., visited Tasso's prison, a real dungeon. There I saw Byron's name cut with his penknife in the wall. The guide said his father accompanied him, and that Byron stayed an hour and a half in the prison and there wrote. We visited the cathedral, fine old Gothic exterior built in 1100, then the library, where is Ariosto's tomb, his inkstand, medals, and chair. I sat in his chair. They were shown by an old man who entered into the spirit of his profession as the showman. Thence to the Campo Santo, passing through the Jews' quarter, of whom there are 2,800, who are shut up every night, as in Rome, like dogs. At the Campo Santo, 2 monuments by Canova. What a desolate town! The streets appeared like State Street on Sunday, and the grass grew. There are 24,000 inhabitants. Under the dukes there are 70,000. It is the native place of Garofalo, Guercino, Canova. A profligate of the Pope administers the government. May 31st. From Ferrara to Rovigo across the Po in a ferry. The stream was wide and strong, about as wide as the Connecticut at Hartford. The road all day was lined with poplars on each side. Fine, bold taste displayed in all their architecture. Every church is a new and pleasing plan. Every chimney is built on an ornamental design. At night we reached Moncelis, after crossing the Adige. Saw our honest countrymen, the Indian corn, growing well. Moncelis is the most picturesque town I have seen in Italy. It has an old ruin of a castle upon the hill, and thence commands a beautiful and extraordinary view. It lies in the wide plain, a dead level whereon Ferrara, Bologna, Rovigo, Este, Padua stand, and even Venice we could dimly see on the horizon, rising with her tiara of proud towers. What a walk and what a ride, delightful picture. To Venice, 38 miles. June 1st. This morn we stopped half a mile this side of the village of Battaglia, on the road to Padua, sent the vettura on to the marketplace, and walked over to Arqua to see the tomb of Petrarch and the house where he spent his latter days. Both are striking and venerable objects. The house is vacant and clean. Its windows look out upon mountains. His portrait and his interviews with Laura are painted in fresco on the walls. They show his chair and the chamber where he died. Good place. It does honor to his head and heart. There grow the pomegranate and fig and olive. At noon at Padua, 3 rich churches, as usual in Italy, unlike all others, the Duomo and San Antonio and San Justin. Visited the Grand Hall, the ancient Sala da Giustizia, 300 feet long, 100 wide, 100 high, without other support than the walls. Stewartson, Wall, and I then went for our breakfast to the most beautiful cafe in Europe. Nothing can exceed the taste and splendor of this room. Visited the university, 1,600 students, 62 professors. Heard the Professor Caldania lecture upon anatomy with a subject. The form of the lecture room was an inverted cone. Saw the museum. The quadrangle of the university is a venerable place covered with armorial bearings. In Venice. From Padua to Venice, 20 miles. Crossed the Brenta and passed a profusion of fine villas, all the grounds full of statues not quite as thick as they could stand. Far the most splendid of all was the Villa Imperiale built by Palladio. Arrived at Mestre, the place of embarkation for Venice, 5 miles off. Here we took a boat and sailed for the famous city. It looked for some time like nothing but New York. We entered the Grand Canal and passed under the Rialto, and presently stepped out of the boat into the front entry of the Gran Bretagna. The front entry of the Gran Bretagna opens also upon a little bridge which connects by a narrow alley with the Piazza of St. Mark. So out we went under the full moon to see the same. It was all glorious to behold. In moonlight this arabesque square is all enchantment, so rich and strange and visionary. Venice, June 2nd. The ancient metropolis of the merchants. In coming to it, it seemed a great oddity, but not at all attractive. Under the full moon, later in the evening, St. Mark's Piazza showed like a world's wonder. But still, I pity the people who are not beavers and yet are compelled to live here. But what matter where and how, as long as all of us are estranged from truth and love, from Him who is truth and love? Sometimes I would hide myself in the dens of the hills and the thickets of an obscure country town. I am so vexed and chagrined with myself, with my weakness, my guilt. Then I have no skill to live in men, that is, with such men as the world is made of, and such as I delight in I seldom find. It seems to me no boy makes so many blunders or says such awkward, contrary, disagreeable speeches as I do. In the attempt to oblige a person, I wound and disgust him. I pity the hapless folks that have to do with me. But would it not be cowardly to flee out of the society and live in the woods? I comfort myself with a reference to the great and eternal revolution which under God bears the good of us all, thine and mine, and that of each by the instrumentality of the other, on the wings of these dull hours and months and years. I collect nothing that can be touched or tasted or smelled, neither cameo, painting, nor medallion, nothing in my trunk but old clothes, but I value much the grown picture which the ages have painted and which I reverently survey. It is wonderful how much we see in 5 months, and how short a time we learn what it has taken so many ages to teach. Again, I have been to St. Mark's and seen his horses and his winged lion, the Bridge of Sighs, the Doge's Palace, the Piazza, the canals. We took a gondola, 3 of us, that is, one too many for the perfect enjoyment of that cunning vehicle, and proceeded to the churches and academy. There is Titian's picture of the Assumption of the Madonna, so glorified by the painters. The young men whom I converse with prefer it to Raphael. There also is another of Titian's, the Presentation of the Virgin, yet a child to the high priest, a very large picture, and I thought I might call it the handsomest picture I have seen, but certainly not the best. It lacks the expression of Raphael. It will not do to compare anything, in my opinion, with his Transfiguration. A great man will find a great subject, or which is the same thing, make any subject great, and what tenderness and holiness beams from the face of the Christ in that work, what emotion! I have never yet seen the face copied in also the so distant copies of that picture. In the Academy is a cast of the Hercules of Canova. The original is in the Torlonia Palace at Rome. It is a tremendous action. Here too are casts of his best works. The chair in which he has seated Madame de Bonaparte is the same beautiful form I admired in the cafe at Padua. Grand pictures here of Paul Veronese, Tintoretto, and Titian. These churches of Venice surpass all the churches in Florence in splendor. The Chiesa della Carmelita has 8 chapels, built at the expense of 8 families, and they are superb. The Chiesa dei Gesuiti is a mostly costly imitation in marble of tapestry hanging throughout the interior. Hiram and Solomon could not beat it. In the Chiesa della Salute is a monument to Canova, built from Canova's design of a tomb for Titian. Canova's design, however, if that little model I saw in the Academy be it, is more impressive than this gorgeous marble execution of the same in the Salute. These churches are all rich with monuments, on many of which is figured the horned bonnet worn by the Doges of Venice. From these we came to the Ducal Palace, up the giant staircase. At the sight of the door we were shown the Lion's Mouth, a hole in the wall into which anciently were thrown the anonymous accusations of any citizen for the eye of the Council of State. Thence we were conducted to the library, then to the hall, a grand chamber whose whole walls and ceilings are adorned by the best pictures of great size by Paul Veronese and his son, and Tintoretto, and Palma Vecchio, and Palma Giovane, and Bonifacio. All of these paintings are historical. This hall and the adjoining chambers contain in this splendid way a chronicle of the Republic. The portraits of 116 Doges hang around on high, among which is the black board, where should be the head of Marino Faliero. On the ceiling, most of the pieces are allegorical, which is as bad in painting as it is in poetry, and at one extremity of the hall a Paradise by Tintoretto, a picture of amazing size. From this hall to the audience chamber where the Doge and his council received foreign ambassadors, then to the council chamber of the 300, with its rostrum and other realities. After seeing these noble apartments, we were conducted to the prisons below, and all the hideous economy and arrangement of them explained. I saw the little blackened chamber from whose walls Lord Byron had those sad inscriptions copied, and passed the dreaded door opening on the Bridge of Sighs down to the third noisome story of the subterranean dungeon. It is a sickening place, and 'tis enough to make one dance and sing that this horrid tyranny is broken in pieces. To be sure, the Austrians are here, but their rule is merciful to that whose story is written here in stone and iron and mire. The policy of the Venetian government kept even the existence of their state prison a secret, and on approach of the French in 1796, they hastily built up the secret passages. The French acted with good sense in opening these damnable holes to the day, and exposing them to the public in order to make their own invasion popular. After leaving the ducal palace, we climbed the stairs of the campanile to the lookout, an essential part of the traveler's duty at Venice, for as in the city you are always in a gutter, it needs get up to this high tower to have any sight of its shape and extent. The day was not very clear, but the view was noble. The campanile itself is a beautiful tower, but it cannot compare with Giotto's wonder at Florence, the poem in stone. I should attempt to describe St. Mark's Piazza, the glory of Venice, and without which the city would not be worth visiting, but that the common prints of it are so good. There stand the painted masts whereon the Republic hung her banners. As it is the only piece of ground in the city where 1,000 men could find elbow room, its daily importance can easily be conceived. We took a long sail across the harbor to the immense arsenal, a place of all manner of naval works 3 miles in circuit. The Bucentaur is gone, but there they show a model of it, and upon it all the places of state, and the garrulous showman tells all the story of the annual marriage of the Adriatic. Here too is an armory where they show without a blush the golden keys of Venice that were made in 1797 to be presented to Napoleon. Worse things are various inventions for torture, and a nameless thing for an incredible indecent cruelty ascribed to Francesco de Carrara. I am speedily satisfied with Venice. It is a great oddity, a city for beavers, but to my thought a most disagreeable residence. You feel always in prison and solitary. 2 persons may live months in adjoining streets and never meet, for you go about in gondolas, and all the gondolas are precisely alike, and the persons within commonly concealed. Then there are no newsrooms, except St. Mark's Piazza, no place of public resort. It is as if you were always at sea, and though for a short time it is very luxurious to lie on the eider-down cushions of your gondola, and read or talk or smoke, drawing to, now the clothesline shutter, now the Venetian blind, now the glass window, as you please, yet there is always a slight smell of bilge water about the thing, and houses in the water remind one of a freshet and of desolation, anything but comfort. I soon had enough of it. I ought not to forget that I went to the Manfrini Palace, and saw its famous gallery of paintings, and Giorgione's picture, and so we left the ocean Rome. Tuesday, June 4th. With our trusty Vetturino, who brought us from Florence, we left Mistra this morn for Padua, and then for Vicenza, where we passed the night. This is the city of Palladio, and embellished with his architecture. The Campo Marzio is a beautiful public walk. Went thence to the Duomo and the Basilica, many fine palaces in this town. June 5th. To Verona, 30 miles. The chief object of interest is the amphitheater built in Trajan's time, a smaller Colosseum, but in excellent preservation, and still used as a theater. A play was getting up in the arena when we came away, then to what is called Juliet's tomb, a very apocryphal sepulchre, then to the Duomo to see an Assumption of the Madonna by Titian, to San Giorgio to see pictures by Paul Veronese. This is his own town, and of Maffei also. Saw the Roman bridge built by Vitruvius over the Adige. There are 12,000 soldiers now in this town. A large part of them are employed in rebuilding the ancient walls. The population from 50,000 to 60,000. This place suffered much in the French invasion in 17, and there's a dash. And I saw many walls honeycombed with musket shot. We do not make many miles in a day, but our journey has many alleviations, and we are very companionable travelers, and some of our Tuscan conversations with a vetturino ludicrous enough. "Vetturino!" shouted my friend Stewartson from within the coach. "Vetturino, perche non arrangiata questo window?" Then we find a hospitable cafe every evening where we find an ice, an oriental narcotic, and Wall and Stewartson their cigar. June 6. Today from Verona to Brescia, 40 miles. From Verona in the morning to Lago da Guarda and crossed the smooth sliding Mincio and spent our 3 hours of nooning at Defenzano. 'Tis Corpus Christi Day, and for a week past, wherever we have been, we have seen preparations for celebrating this festa with what pomp each city could. A splendid procession is everywhere made of under awnings, and in many places I believe over carpets laid along the streets. Even in this little village every house has hung out its quilts and damask and brocade, and the walls are lined. At the altar in the church officiate little girls dressed out in white and gold with wings for angels. We passed today many beautiful villas, and what was new and pleasant, we saw no beggars. The women in this country universally wear in their hair silver pins with heads as large as eggs. They remind one of the electrical machine. All the way they were stripping the mulberry trees of leaves for the food of the silkworms which are in every house. I went into a house and begged to see the animals. The padrona led me upstairs and showed me the creatures in every age and state. She had given up the whole of the primo piano, or what we call the second story, to them. Then to the Brescia, all the Italian towns are different and all picturesque. The well-paved Brescia, the church of the Madonna dei Miracoli, how daintily it is carved without to the very nerves of the strawberry and vine leaf. Italy is the country of beauty, but I think specially in the northern part. Everything is ornamented. A peasant wears a scarlet cloak. If he has no other ornament, he ties on a red garter or knee band. They wear flowers in the hat or the buttonhole. A very shabby boy will have the eye of a peacock's feather in his hat. In general, the great coats and jackets of the common people are embroidered, and the other day I saw a cripple leaning on a crutch very finely carved. Every fountain, every pump, every post is sculptured, and not the commonest tavern room, but its ceiling is painted. Red is a favorite color, and on a rainy morning at Messina the streets blazed with red umbrellas. In Brescia they have lately made some excavations of their antiquities, and laid open the floor and shafts of the pillars of a Roman temple of Hercules. They have found a fine bronze Victory there. At a fountain in the piazza was a statue of Canovas. I thought a clever mason might make as good a one. In Brescia, 4,000 soldiers, porticos in all these towns in north of Italy. The roads seem the best and costliest I have ever seen, but there are no bad roads in Italy. Bonaparte, with whatever intent, was a great benefactor to this whole peninsula from Naples northward. I noticed that the new buildings erected or erecting are in as bold and as beautiful a style as old ones. Every church, every villa is original, and what gates they can make to a villa or palace. June 7th. Today, crossed the Mela. In all this Lombard region they write on a signpost the name of each town thus: Comune de Ospedaletto Capa Luogo del Secondo Distretto, Provincia di Brescia, and a similar threefold inscription in every village. We begin to see goiters on both men and women. The Vetera stopped at noon at Calico. Wall and I have walked on towards Treviglio, And now, whilst he sketches, I sit upon an arch that crosses a brook and listen to a bird's song. 'Tis surely the nightingale. June 8th. This morn at 10 o'clock entered Milan by a broad and splendid street, saw the top of the cathedral from far upon the road, and got nearer view of its glories before arriving at the hotel. June 9th. This cathedral is the only church in Italy that can pretend to compare with St. Peter's. It is a most impressive and glorious place without and within, and its exterior altogether as remarkable and deserving minute attention as its interior. It was begun by Andrea Commodia in 1386 and is not yet finished, although always being built. When completed, it will have 7,000 statues, great and small, upon the outside. There are now 5,000. It is all built to the minutest part of white marble, and, as the showman asserted, would have cost a mountain of gold, but that the founder had left it to a quarry of marble. 42 artists are perpetually employed upon it. The walk upon the top of the church is delightful from the novelty and richness of the scene. Neighbored by this army of marble saints and martyrs, with scores of exquisitely sculptured pinnacles rising and flowering all around you, the noble city of Milan beneath, and all the Alps in the horizon, it is one of the grandest views on earth. Then, inside the church, the grand Gothic perspective of the aisles, the color of the light which all enters through stained glass, the richness and magnitude of all the objects. Truly it is good to be there. An immense surface in this cathedral is glass window. Thus behind the great altar are 3 huge windows only separated by sashes, each of which is wide by 12 panes, each pane 1 foot, and high by 12 panes, each pane 2 feet, and over all a great arch in which the glass is of a regular shape. These huge windows contain the whole history of the mankind from Adam and Eve down, each pane being a separate picture. Underneath the church is the sumptuous tomb of St. Charles Borromeo, whose history is the glory of Milan, and has furnished Manzoni with a hero in I Promessi Sposi. The kindness of the Comte del Verme has shown me and my friends all the curiosities of Milan. In his coach we have made the circuit of the city, as travelers say, killed it thoroughly. We visited not less than 8 churches beside the cathedral, some of them very rich, and 3 centuries old, which was as delicately pictured as if done by a camel's hair pencil. We went to the Ospital Grande, which is the most considerable institution of the sort in Europe. A magnificent charity. There are 2,500 beds, and almost all are full. Its aid is gratuitous. Everybody is received who applies, and we walk through the corridor after corridor of beds, whereon lay the sick of all manner of diseases. Great and good and sad, this hospital is a little city in itself. A very different spectacle was the Palazzo de Brera, which has a rich gallery of paintings, a great public library, and an astronomical observatory, which were all shown to us. Then we visited the triumphal arch dell'Arco del Sempione, designed and begun by Napoleon as the termination of the road of Simplon from Paris to Milan. Its finishing is by the Austrian government, of course, with some variation in the bas-reliefs. Then to the Ambrosian Library and Museum, where I saw Petrarch's copy of Virgil, all written by himself, and to the Ospedale dei Frati, Fate bene fratelli, and to the castle, and to the arena, and to a collegio, and to a registry office, etc., etc. My friend the Count speaks with no good will of the Austrian government, so jealous, so rapacious, which holds Italy down by the pointed cannon. There are 96,000 or 97,000 Austrian troops in Lombardy. When he solicited a passport to go to the United States of America, it was 16 months before it was granted him. I visited the church of San Domenico to see the famous fresco painting of the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. It is sadly spoiled by time and damp. The face of Christ is still very remarkable. Milan is a well-built town with broad streets and a little railroad of stone for the wheels to run upon in the middle of the street. It looks too modern to be so conspicuous in European history as it has been, for Lombardy was the theater of every war. There is an advantage which these old cities have over our new ones that forcibly strike an American, namely that the poorest inhabitants live in good houses. In process of time, a city is filled with palaces, the rich ever deserting the old ones for new, until beggars come to live in what were costly and well accommodated dwellings. Thus all the trattorias, even of little pretension, have their carved work and fresco painting, as this of the Marina, where I dine with my companions. Milan, June 10th. Architecture, shall I speak what I think? Seems to me ever an imitation. Accustomed to look at our American churches as imitative, I cannot get it out of my head that these which I now see are only more splendid and successful imitations also. I am perplexed with my inveterate littleness. I must and will see the things in detail and analyze all, every noble sentiment to the contrary notwithstanding. It seems to me nothing is truly great, nothing impresses us, nothing overawes, nothing crowds upon us and kills calculation. We always call in the effect of imagination, coax the imagination to hide this and enlarge that, and even St. Peter's, nor this frost-work cathedral at Milan, with its 5,000 marble people all over its towers, can charm down the little imp. It is in the soul that architecture exists, and Santa Croce and this Duomo are poor far behind imitations. I would rather know the metaphysics of architecture, as of shells and flowers, than anything else in the matter. But one act of benevolence is better than a cathedral, so do your duty, yours. Architecture, said the lady, is frozen music. And Iarno says in Wilhelm that he who does the best in each one thing he does all, for he sees the connection between all good things. Tuesday, June 11th. Left Milan in the diligence with Wall and Stewardson and the Misses Bridgen. Before sunset, we arrived on the beautiful banks of the Lago Maggiore, and crossed the Adda, which is there an arm of the lake of Sesto Calendo, and stopped at Arona to dine. Though we passed directly below the famous colossal statue of San Carlo Borromeo after leaving Arona, it was so dark that I could not see it, which I regretted much. We rode all night and reached Domo de Ossola next morn to breakfast in town at the foot of the Alps. The maitre d'hotel here spoke English, and we were much cheated, two facts which are said to be concomitant. The whole of the day, 12 June, was spent in crossing the mountains by the celebrated road of the Simplon, cut and built by Bonaparte. Let it be a glory to his name, him the great hand of our age. Truly it is a stupendous work, passing through every variation of ragged mountain scenery, now through the earth or solid rock in the form of a tunnel, now in successive easy inclined planes called galleries, climbing the sides of a precipice, now crossing some rift in the mountain on a firm bridge, and so working its way up from the hot plain of Lombardy to cold waterfalls and huge snowbanks, and up and upward to the bleak hamlet of Sempione, which almost crowns the top. Here we see our own breath, and are very glad to get into the house and avoid the cold air. Over a wild mountain cascade, and within a gallery cut through the rock, Bonaparte has had the honesty to write Italo er nap imp MDCCCV. Siard was his principal engineer. And these, I thought, are the mountains of freedom. This queer ridge of matter is of such proved moral efficiency. Let their Spartan hymn ascend. I saw a good many of the Swiss peasantry on the hillsides. How different from the Italians on one side, or the French on the other, but exactly resembling the faces and dresses of their countrymen who emigrate to the United States. It is marvelous to see their houses on such narrow lodgments, halfway up a mural precipice, as was said of Cortona, like a picture hanging on a wall. What can they do with their children? We dined at Sempione, and soon began the descent of the mountain. The wheel of the diligence is chained and shod with a heavy log of green wood, yet the descent at some point looks perilous enough. The mountain views are very fine. No extensive prospect is commanded in the ascent or from the top, but we see many noble summits of the chain as we come down toward Briga. We arrived safely at Briga at the foot of the mountain after sunset. We have left the Italian speech behind us, and though in Switzerland all is French. After supper we set forward again, and unluckily, having taken my place outside by day, I was compelled to ride the whole cold night, sub Jove frigido, and was very thankful to one of my fair friends within who loaned me a shawl for the occasion. At dawn we reached Sion, and in the forenoon Martigny. We had taken our places for Martigny, intending to visit Mont Blanc from thence, but the sky was overcast, and it rained a little, and we were afraid of a storm, so we relinquished our purpose, or at least postponed it for consideration, at Geneva. June 13th. On we came, passing the fine cascade of Pisevich, and stopped an hour at St. Maurice. Thence, in more convenient vehicles, through a country of grandest scenery, passing through Clarens and along the banks of Lake Leman by the castle of Chillon, then through Vevey, and we reached Lausanne before nightfall. The repose and refreshment of a good hotel were very welcome to us after riding 2 nights, but the next morning, 14th, was fine, and Mr. Wall and I walked out to the public promenade, a high and ornamented grove which overlooks the lake and commands the view of a great amphitheater of mountains. We are getting toward France. In the cafe where we breakfasted, we found a printed circular inviting those whom it concerned to a rifle match, to the intent, as the paper stated, of increasing their skill in that valuable accomplishment, and of drawing more closely the bonds of that regard with which we are, etc. After breakfast, I inquired my way to Gibbon's house, and was easily admitted to the garden. The summer house is removed, but the floor of it is still there, where the history was written and finished. I stood upon it, and looked forth upon the noble landscape of which he speaks so proudly. I plucked a leaf of the lime tree he planted, and of the acacia, successors of those under which he walked. I have seen, however, many landscapes as pleasant and more striking. At 10 o'clock we took the steamboat for Geneva, and sailed up Lake Leman. The passage was very long, 7 hours, for the wind was ahead, and the engine not very powerful. We touched at Coppet. The lake is most beautiful near Geneva. It was not clear enough to see Mont Blanc, or else it was not visible. Mount Varens and Mount Rosa were seen. Geneva, June 16th. Here am I in the stern old town, the resort of such various minds, of Calvin, of Rousseau, of Gibbon, of Voltaire, of de Stael, of Byron, on the blue Rhone by the placid Lake Leman. Mont Blanc towers above the Alps on the east sublimely with his 3 summits. Jura on the west is marking the line of France, and the lake lies in beauty before me. Everybody is polite. Yesterday, to oblige my companions, and protesting all the way upon the unworthiness of his memory, I went to Ferney, to the chateau, the salon, the bedchamber, the gardens of Voltaire, the king of the scorners. His rooms were modest and pleasing, and hung with portraits of his friends. Franklin and Washington were there. The view of the lake and the mountains commanded by the lawn behind the chateau is superior to that of Gibbon's garden at Lausanne. The old porter showed us some pictures belonging to his old master, and told a story that did full justice to his bad name. Yet it would be a sin against faith and philosophy to exclude Voltaire from toleration. He did his work as the buzzard and tarantula do theirs. We had a fine ride home, so royally towers up Mont Blanc with his white triple top. On the way we passed the stone which marks the boundary of France, which made Dr. Stewardson crow like a chanticleer, and the grass he thought greener. Visited the music box manufactory and the watchmakers. The music man offered to make a box with 2 airs of Beethoven for 50 francs, to be received by me in Paris. Prices of the best watches that they can make are 500 francs. Of the second class, without a compensation, but esteemed as good for all ordinary purposes, 300 francs. S bought one for 275, the difference of value being in the weight of the case. They speak of smuggling with perfect simplicity, and offer to send you the watch to Paris via smuggler, that is, for a few francs. Through the Mrs. Bridgen's acquaintance and Mr. Wolfe's family, I was carried away to hear M. Gissot, a very worthy Calvinist who has been ejected from the national church. His exercise was the catechism and exhortation of a large class of children. Then I was introduced to Mr. Cordis and others of their brethren. Very worthy men they seemed. I spent the day at the house of Mr. Wolfe. The daughter told me that if I was, as I said, a seeker, she thought I ought to make it a point of duty to stop longer at Geneva, and so offered in very pretty broken English to intrude me to the minister who begun the exercise. She had learned English because her house was destined to receive boarders, etc., etc. I owed them all much kindness, but if I had known anything, I should have made acquaintance with M. Chenevier first. After all this kindness, it would have been great violence to have gone away to him. The established church of Geneva is now Unitarian, and the 3 Calvinistic clergymen of the city are ejected. France. Left Geneva in the diligence for Paris Monday morning at 4 o'clock, and presently crossed the line of France and began the ascent of Mount Jura. As we rose toward the top, what noble pictures appeared on the Swiss side! The Alps and Mont Blanc in all his breadth, towering up so cold and white and dim towards heaven, all uninhabitable and almost inaccessible. Yet more than Saussure have reached the top. France, France, it is not only a change of name. The cities, the language, the faces, the manners have undergone a wonderful change in 3 or 4 days. The running fight we have kept up so long with the Fierta of Postilions and Padroni in Italy is over, and all men are complacent. The face of the country is remarkable. Not quite a plain, but a vast undulating champaign without a hill, and all planted like the Connecticut intervalles. No fences, the fields full of working women. We rode in the coupe of a diligence by night and by day for 3 days and a half, and arrived in Paris at noon Thursday. This is the end of Part 4 of Emerson's Journal Collection number 24 in Volume 3. In the next video, we will take up with Emerson as he has just arrived in Paris and read on his travels from there. Thank you for listening.